Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 5 of the Welty at Home book club reading of The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. Today, we are embarking on a discussion of part 3. So this is our first week's discussion of part 3. And I will turn it over to Suzanne.
All right. Well, we'll get ourselves prepared for Jay for next week. He'll be with us, perhaps from some distant locale, but he's still going to join us. So that's great. Today we'll be talking about third part of The Sound and the Fury, April 6, 1928, Jason's section. And I thought I might begin by just reading you a little bit from William Faulkner about biographical origins of characters. This is Joseph Faulkner. Maud Faulkner was characteristically frank when she talked about Jason. He talks just like my husband did. My husband had a hardware store uptown at one time. His way of talking was just like Jason's, same words and same style. He also employed a Negro named Jobus, just like the character in the story. He was always after Jobus for not working hard enough, just like in the story. The only person in the novel for whom Jason shows any warmth is his sometimes mistress, a Memphis prostitute named Lorraine. Besides Lorraine, the only person who shows any warmth for Jason is his mother, Caroline Bascom Compson, who feels him to be the only one of her children who is not only a Bascom, but does not take up against her with the others. Phil Stone was as sure of the models for Jason and Mrs. Compson as Maud Faulkner was of the model for Jason. Of Rosamond Stone, he would say, "By the time I was 5 years old, I knew Miss Rosie was a fool." He would look on appalled at her treatment of an orphan niece and watch as she became a self-declared invalid retreating from life. Jason, said Stone, was modeled on his brother, James Stone, Jr. Between him and my mother, he said, there was a typical harmless but complete Oedipus and Jocasta complex. Anybody who knew Jim Stone would recognize him from the way Jason talks, and many have actually done so. Moreover, Stone would tell his son, Jim Stone was completely irresponsible, was dishonest in small ways, and was a prime chiseler. A great brother to have. Hope my brothers don't say things like that about me. Anyway, from the time he was first to come to know Miss Rosie, Faulkner had been amused by her, especially by her interest in catastrophes. Stone would remember his friend saying, "Miss Rosie, did you read all about those folks that was killed in a steamboat accident?" Then he would watch her animated response. When he left, Stone would remember her comment, "I declare that Billy Faulkner is the nicest little boy." There were early memories that Faulkner could use in creating this mother and son. Prefiguring Jason's adult money mania was his childish avarice, hands in his pockets, even when it cost him a fall. Petted by, and I really don't, somebody, Faulkner person is going to tell me if I've mispronounced this name, by Damity, petted by Damity, Jack Faulkner was a good boy, but he too would fall down walking with his hands in his pockets. Billy Faulkner never had very much in his, though there was enough to buy clothes when he was playing the dandy, and he saved much of his post office salary for his time in New Orleans and Europe. But in these present years, there had not been much, as his loans from Stone and advances from Liverite had testified. Jason constantly complains about his responsibilities and financial burdens in supporting himself, his widowed mother, and the rest of the household. More than once, Faulkner's fiction would prefigure events in his life. In less than 4 years, he would find himself in Jason's position, and his own bitter complaints would sound much like Jason's. He would encounter burdens so heavy and frustration so grinding that it would have taken another temperament than his to react differently. But he had the capacity to react as Jason did, and with the same kind of morbid humor directed at the causes of his frustrations and the objects of his resentment. He could look into himself and find there something to help create this third Compson brother, just as he had felt some of Quentin's emotions earlier. So that's Faulkner on biographical backgrounds. So we might be thinking about those. And if you want to ask Jay Watson about that, I think that would be a good thing to do. But let's talk now about Jason and his character as it is established through this monologue. And I thought we might start by talking about what we know about Jason from Benji and Quentin that we come to the novel with, that we come to this section with. So when we read Jason's first words, I love to read this, so I'm just going to do it. Once a bitch, always a bitch, what I say. I says you're lucky if her playing out of school is all that worries you. Once a bitch, always a bitch, what I say. Okay. Do we know that? We have an inkling that that's the sort of conversation we're going to get out of Jason? Has he been set up for us in the previous two sections? Anyone want to start us off? Harriet? Beverly. Beverly, then Harriet.
I think that this is exactly what we would expect from him and what we've seen already in his thoroughly unpleasant personality. And I mentioned when I was at the Welty house for a tour recently that I had forgotten how much I despise Jason. I have not been able to find anything to pity or to he's just an absolute horrible person throughout. And this, he starts off, I mean, he's talking about a 17-year-old girl here. His treatment of Miss Quentin is horrible, and of his mother and of everybody else. And I think that what we see here is exactly what we should have been prepared for in the two sections that we've had already. And he, his sending, he's going to send Benji off to Whitfield to the state hospital when he can. We know that.
Well, in the first section, we saw him call Benji a damn loony.
Right.
He's been dismissive of him, critical of him from that. So we've had that, and we've seen him treat Miss Quentin. We saw him treating Miss Quentin badly in that section as well. All right. Pearl and Tom.
We know that he is favored by his mother, and everything we think about his mother, we then easily transfer over to Jason. So in Quentin's section on 102, for example, after they find out that Caddy is pregnant, Quentin tells this memory of conversation where Mrs. Compson says, Jason, I must go away and you keep the others. I'll take Jason and go where nobody knows this. So he'll have a chance to grow up and forget all this. The others don't love me. They never have loved anything with that streak of Compson, selfishness and false pride. Jason was the only one my heart went out to without dread. And so we're set up for whatever Mrs. Compson thinks behaves, how she behaves is also the way this young son, Jason, they're going to be two of a kind.
All right. So Quentin has prepared us for it as well. Yeah. Harriet.
So I'm thinking about all that we know about Jason before we get to the section, but also what we don't know, which is his voice. And I'm thinking about, it always strikes me that Jason's voice is like a perfect representation of his parents' voices. I'm thinking about how we don't expect his humor. And sometimes students don't get his humor because they're so busy hating him. But I think that Mr. Compson's voice of sarcasm, which is a measure in his case of disappointed ideals, of a distance between the ideal and the real, with a slight twist, is Jason's sarcasm, which is about debunking those ideals. And of course, his mother's self-pity and He's got a good measure of that in his voice too.
Mhm.
But that comedy is something that that maybe we didn't see before we met him.
Yeah, I mean, the comedy is really something here, isn't it? That you've somehow, I don't think I quite expected on my first reading. And it's hard, even as you detest him for what he's saying, it's hard not to laugh at some of the things he says. When he talks about playing golf with China doorknobs and walking sticks, that's, okay. It's kind of funny, yeah. I like the idea. I hadn't thought about that, of the combination of the kind of whining, self-pitying voice of Mrs. Compson and the sardonic, sarcastic voice of his father combined. Less intellectual than his father, certainly. What else? What we're prepared for, what we're not prepared for in this section. Yeah.
I saw Tom raise his hand.
Okay.
Well, Jason lives at home, and you wonder why he continues to live at home when he disparages everything there. He mistreats Elsie, he mistreats his mother, and his whole family history. He works in a hardware store where he's supposed to have had a financial interest, but he didn't really do that. He used that money to buy the car that he can't drive without getting sick. And so he's an ironic character in almost every way. Everything he does turns out really badly for him because of him.
Yeah.
So
Kind of a self-destructive character who proclaims he doesn't need any help, but he's still living at home,
yeah.
unable to drive a car for himself and to manage or to make any money on the stock market. Somebody's going to. I understand that he's selling short and that he wants the price of the stocks to go down, but this is beyond my level of expertise. Okay, Marcia. We can't hear you, Marcia.
My video is not working, but I just finally unmuted. So I actually, this section was a kind of relief to me. And I know I am very in the minority, if not alone, in actually enjoying it, because I was so sick of Quentin's whining in the Quentin section. And that he's full of self-pity too, although it's mixed with anger and intellectualness that makes him seem a little bit better. But really, I was sort of happy for a very self-righteous, angry man is always funny. The Prisoner of Second Avenue is funny because you get the main character constantly voicing the negative thoughts that many people really carry around with them. And so a self-righteous, angry man is a comic character in many ways. And why does he stay at home? Because I think he still has a loyalty to his family that Quentin gave up when he committed suicide, and that the mother gives up. I mean, she claims to be all family, but she's completely self-absorbed. And I think there are some things about Jason that I like a little bit. So I'll just throw that out and let the fight begin.
All right. All right. Well, I must say, I don't like him, but I do find him to be funny. And I also, I agree with you that in a way it's a kind of relief because he is more grounded in the world around him. Even though he goes off into the past as the others do, you get more of a sense of about those birds pooping on the square, and the flat tire and what the countryside looks like, and it's got that bigger lice on his pants, and you have a much, I think, more real sense of the world around him than you do with the others. Pearl or Tom?
Tom first, and then
Tom
me.
first. Okay, tag team.
Jason's name, his name is for the the mythological figure who was searching for the golden fleece. And that's Jason's pursuit of a fortune in the cotton speculative market, where he's completely failed and, you know, been taken out. So I mean, just everything about his life is a kind of comedy and brutal. And he even has to participate in it to some degree himself. You know, I couldn't think when something happens, well, ways it could have been worse, and why wasn't it? I mean, he expected terrible things to happen to him. But you know, there's one moment in the novel at his father's funeral, which he's gone to with his mother and his marvelous uncle, who is the terrible person in every kind of way, and they just leave him in the cemetery and drive
In
home.
the rain.
The uncle wants to get a drink, and it is always possible, I think, that maybe he's even fooling around with his sister, because he's always taking her into the library and closing the door and giving her a drink. So they rush home and leaving Jason to come home on his own. But then Caddy, who's not supposed to be there, shows up, and he does something mean and terrible to her, in effect. So
He's saying he's displacing his anger onto her, his anger at them displaced onto her.
Yeah.
Pearl?
I wanted to tell about, I was teaching this in high school in an advanced class, and the students came in. We were going to talk about the Jason section, and there's one tall and ungainly and brilliant but really odd student that comes in, and he says, "I just love Jason." And my heart just like gripped, because I thought, what am I going to do now? Once it so I said, fortunately, I said, well, tell us about why you like Jason. He said, well, first of all, he's got my name. So, okay, fine, but that doesn't mean you like him. But he went on to explain how Jason was so misunderstood, that he had to live in his own world and no one understood his problems or who he was or what he wanted to do, what his dreams were. And this exactly described this person who is now a brilliant success. But that sort of goes along with Marcia's notion of, you know, liking him, looking for something where we might be able to understand
or
him,
at least pitying him. Yeah.
or maybe have empathy of some sort.
In the cemetery, when he says, I felt kind of funny, and I think he says that twice, that's the one point I think where I felt, okay, this is a kind of grief at the loss of his father that he can't express, he can't acknowledge, and then he backs off from it immediately. So Jacob.
Compared to, say, Benji, and I think we talked about this with Dr. Watson, the notion of Benji being a kind of recording device of reality, to the point that, you know, he doesn't fully understand certain like human emotions or social relationships, but he is recording. And for Jason, it's different. As much as the world seems exteriorized, we're caught in that real world, like you just said. But the thing is, Jason is terrible at introspection, at being honest to himself, being honest about his complaining. As clear as his narration seems, his excuses, his refusal to explore why he thinks. I mean, like you just said, one of the most clarifying moments in his sequence is when he just says it made him feel funny, and he will not go beyond that. And so a lot of the clarity, and I'm going to put scare quotes around the word clarity, is kind of a kind of fake performance. We do not gain access to Jason, I think, like we do with Benji or Quentin.
Great, thank you. And, you know, and also self-deceived. When Caddy is upset that he has just dashed by and let her get a glimpse, you know, said, you can't trust a woman. When she goes back out, well, you can't trust a woman. He's just bilked her. Or when he says to about Quentin, I never would do you like that. And he's made her life a living hell. And so there is this kind of self-justification, rationalization, inability to see himself clearly. Harry.
So I was thinking about is it Job who says, you fool,
Yeah.
real smart man. He says, who's that? He says, you, Jason, it's the man you fool. But Jason is this like series of contradictions. I mean, we talked about him as cruel and comic, and Faulkner says in the appendix that he's the one sane Compson in generations, and we also think he's irrational, and he presents himself as, we see him as victimizer, and he presents himself as victim, and he's got a point. I mean, he does have a point that that the family has sacrificed for Quentin. They have not paid attention to him, he is working to carry the family. He is, he says, we didn't take me north for a job. They brought the job here. And the job is taking care of Mrs. Compson and Quentin and Dilsey and the household. And he has a point about the position that he's in. He doesn't have a point in the sense that he could go. I mean, I think he stays largely because there's no place that he is as important as in Mrs. Compson's house. But he is, but in some ways, he has been the family's victim too.
Yes, but I don't think there is any real, and Marcia was talking about his, he's the one person who is true to the family, not like Quentin. But I think his concern for family is totally self-interested. It's not what he can do for the family, it's the family name and what that means about him. Mm-hmm. And it's not a concern for the family members per se, I think. What else? We've got these brothers that are all focused on their sister, Caddy. What do we find out about Jason and Caddy in comparison to Benji or Quentin, perhaps? And then I want to talk about Miss Quentin. Anyone? We see the longest memories he has deal with Caddy, don't they, when he goes into the past? Pearl, Tom?
Well, he blames Caddy for his misfortunes as well, because the man that she's set herself up to marry because she's pregnant is the man who was cheated at cards at Harvard and was thrown out, and who's a terrible person. But he was going to be the opportunity for Jason to get out of town and work in a bank. And you can imagine how marvelous that would be to have Jason working in your bank. He would probably steal your money. But that's another part of that whole dimension, that Caddy is blamed for his not having made the fortune he thinks he could make if he became a banker, but he's not even a very good speculator in the cotton market. He's losing there. So there's a kind of, anytime he presents himself as being capable of something, he turns around and does something, and he's already done something that proves that he's not competent to do anything.
Quentin is obsessed with Herbert Head's arrival in Jefferson, but so is Jason, and for different reasons. Quentin because he doesn't want his sister to marry him, and Jason because he wants that job. So both of them focused on that. What else? Anything else about his relationship with his sister? What about his niece? What about his relation? Oh, Beverly.
Well, I think he has some of the same issues that Quentin has with his sister. I think that there is sexual component as well, just as Quentin does, not in the same, necessarily the same way, but I think both men have sex issues with sex. I mean, we know that Jason is asking his prostitute girlfriend, or we see with his inner monologue, to help him. So, which to me indicates that he's got some problems with performance. And so I think that the obsession with Caddy that Quentin has is shared maybe in a lesser degree with Jason, and that whole kind of murky, incestuous, homosexual perhaps in their tendency with what's going on. I think that's an element to what's wrong with both of the guys.
All right. Jacob, and then Harriet.
I think you can cut that whole sequence, which is funny, with Jason chasing Quentin around the square, is a textbook example of the Gothic story type. That is to say, every Gothic tale is about a woman fleeing a kind of sexual or dangerous creature, and Jason is the creature, and the Oxford Square is the kind of Gothic castle, and they're constantly running into each other in alleyways, and she is always trying to stay away from him. So we're kind of in the perspective, I think, of the kind of villain of a Gothic tale.
He's always describing how she's at home, her kimono is falling off of her. She's half naked, and are you going out dressed like that? And he seems so focused upon her sexuality. Harriet?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about Jason and Mrs. Compson, and Jason and women generally. I think that Jason is, once a bitch, always a bitch. That Jason is a misogynist who is his mother's favorite, but he despises her, and he's only the favorite of a woman he despises. He has every respect for a good, honest whore, but good women are just as are horrifying in the shape of Mrs. Compton. And Caddy has, Caddy has been, as a child, everything that Jason might want to be. She has been willful and independent and experimental, and he resents her. But he's now in a position to. I think we see a different Caddy in this section, in the sense that we see a woman who has absorbed the family's disdain of her, to feel a kind of self contempt and powerlessness, and that lip that he remembers raising as she gets angry and stands perfectly still, but she's stuck. She's undone by her relationship with his family.
Yeah, the relationship with his mother is kind of amazing to me. I mean, the first sentence he says, he's attacking her. You've never tried to do anything with her, I says. How do you expect to begin this late when she's 17 years old? So from the get-go, he's after his mother. And yeah, and the revenge on Caddy, who has, I think that's a good point too, who has been what he cannot be, and he's after that revenge. Oh. What else? What about his relationship with Dilsey? We're talking about all the women in his life. Jacob?
not necessarily just his relationship to Dilsey, but I also want to say Jason has a particular relationship with the use of the N-word. And I know Faulkner has been accused of overusing that word. But one thing that's really interesting to me is that the clear kind of, ugly character of the group definitely uses the word way more than anyone else. And just kind of looking ahead, I was looking through the appendix when we get to Jason. The last word that's used in that appendix is once again the N-word. And I sense Faulkner being deliberately sensitive with his use. That is to say, it's not, this is not a problem with Faulkner. He is saying that, this not so great person uses the N-word in a particular way, but that is overuses it. So I was struck by that this time, where I could really sense Faulkner is employing that word with intent throughout to kind of create an overall effect of Jason, the kind of person he is.
Right. So that his language,
Mhm.
his wit characterizes him, but his vile language also characterizes him. And I think, that's certainly right. He's the character who uses this word more than any other, and it damns him in our eyes, in the reader's eyes, I think. What else? Let's talk about Dilsey. Yeah, Anita.
I was really struck by how Dilsey has a confidence in her ability to even control Jason. I mean, she's old and feeble and barely getting around, and she tells Quentin, "I'm not going to let him hurt you." And there's a couple other times where she has a complete confidence in her ability to take control of the situation. And I don't know that she would, but you don't, like, it kind of leaves that open. Like, Jason never attacks her. It never comes to a head between him and Dilsey. But I really like her strength of character.
Yeah, she stands up to him. She's not subservient.
Yeah.
She's not deferential. She's not playing the role that he would like her to play. And he can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
Or he doesn't do anything about it. Yeah. Job is the same way. Job says, you're not the man I work for. You're outsmarting yourself. He stands up to him as well.
Yeah.
And so this man who professes such disdain for Black people is the one who cannot, who recognizes at some level the strength of the people he is opposing.
Yeah, they can see through his bluster.
Yeah, he's all talk. Yeah. Tom.
Well, and Dilsey taking Benjamin to the church service is a really
The next section.
marvelous.
Yeah. Next section, but yes.
That at the end of listening to this sermon, that is very interesting. Benji has a tear in his eye. So he's obviously comprehended something in that experience in the church. Whereas at home, he's been treated from the very beginning as otherworldly. And I keep thinking about Helen Keller, who the Faulkners, I think, knew her family and everything. Her mother grew up in Memphis, and the man she married had been in the Confederate Army with Faulkner and some of the same areas of battle. And that, the Keller family, I mean,
Thompson.
No, the Helen Keller's family just exhausted everything that they had and try to find a cure for what was wrong with her. They never accepted it as being something else. And it turned out they found someone, and she really, became this remarkably articulate person who wrote books, who gave lectures, who became the legendary sort of figure that she is. but she was obviously struck by the same kind of illness that Benji was struck with. There's some sort of childhood illness, which in Benji's case, it was probably from being left to play in the water while their grandmother's funeral was being prepared or whatever. And that they're taken into the house and Caddy says, this is the room where we have the measles. Why are we being put in here? So we get a sense of a childhood illness as being the cause of Benji's problems. And that there's a historic family that was in the same part of the country as
The contrast between the families
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
being notable. Yeah. Jenny.
Yeah, about Dilsey.
Yes.
It kind of hit me. I mean, early on through the book, she complains about, I've got to do this, that, and the other, and don't get in my way. But at one point she says, it just hit me a different way. It was when Jason had come in and says, you come in as what you've been up to this evening. You know how much work I got to do. Why didn't you get here on time? And it just reminded me so much of his mother, that woe is me. and I just thought, gosh, I wonder where this relationship is going further on. You know, it's kind of like a death spiral almost. And then the other thing about Jason and how he responds to people. You know, he was a pet of his mother. He wasn't someone that he needed to maybe please his mother, but in terms of forming relationships and social niceties, he didn't have to do that. He could come off later on as cruel. He didn't have to, he didn't learn the ways of getting along with people, you could say, in some way. But as far as Dilsey, I kind of wondered where, that was headed later on, if at all. All of a sudden, she was like his mother.
Okay. Now, so, and she says many times, I raised these children. I can raise one more about Miss Quentin. So that she plays the more practical role of mother than Mrs. Compson does. Yeah.
That's right.
Jacob.
One of the kind of funny ironies of this sequence is that the word that is used the most, almost constantly, almost every page, is the word business, to kind of hint at, this is how Jason sees the world. Business. It's none of your business. It's my business. My business is this. But then there's this remarkable passage. I have a different book, unfortunately. I think he's talking to the owner of the business that he works, and he's trying to kind of sneak out and go get lunch and check on Quentin. There's this really funny moment when he says something like, he says to his boss, all right, it's your stomach. If you want to make a slave of yourself to your business, it's all right with me. And then his boss says, I reckon you'll never be a slave to any business. And then Jason says comically, not unless it's Jason Compson's business. So what I find interesting there is that pact exchange of business and being a slave to your own business. That Jason is this independent contractor he pretends to be. He's the hustler, and yet he is put in this position where he is enslaved to business, and he's always one step behind it, and he is powerless to it. So as independent as he seems, he's almost racialized as a kind of slave to the modern business world. He's always at a loss.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to play the business game. Caddy, he at one point says $50,000. I don't think that adds up, but a substantial amount of money has come from Caddy. He's put some money into his mother's account, but he's kept most of it. And how much does he have left in that box that's locked up. Evidently, he has lost big playing the stock market over the years. And so the man who thinks he is the sharpest businessman in town has done nothing but squander a lot of money. So what else? Shall we talk about Miss Quinton? How do we respond to her? Named for her uncle, 17 years old. The closest thing to a father she's ever had is Jason Compson. What about her? Yeah, Jenny?
Just star-crossed.
Star-crossed, yeah.
Yeah.
Through no fault of her own,
Just
brought back into this world
uh,
of
very sad.
Jefferson. Yeah. What about Miss Quinton and Dilsey? That relationship. How does she treat Dilsey, and what do you make of that? And how do you, Beverly, how do you respond to that? Whoops, you're muted.
Oh, I think she has sort of a love-hate relationship with Dilsey. I think that she does not, she's mean to Dilsey. I mean, she doesn't appreciate Dilsey trying to shield her from Jason, but by the same token, I think she feels very strongly that she has a mother. She doesn't need Dilsey to be her mother. And she has a mother if she can just get back to that mother, because the mother is going to send her money, and she's running away, and she plans to eventually reunite with her mother. So I think there's probably a fear that if she gets too comfortable with Dilsey being her mother figure, that, you know, maybe she won't want to leave when she gets the opportunity to go. I mean, Dilsey certainly does her best to nurture and protect Quinton, but Quinton has all of the worst characteristics of a 17-year-old girl who's not happy with her life. And I've been through a couple of those, and have a 17-year-old granddaughter. None of them like her, but I think that she's fighting for her independence from this family, and to get it, she has to turn her back on all of Dilsey's best intentions as well.
And speaking of using the N word, she calls her.
She does.
That. So if she has partaken of the kind of racism of her culture, of her family, even as she recognized, she turns to Dilsey, but then she also turns on her, you know, Harriet and John.
So I've been trying to picture Quinton, and I'm thinking about her as a bodily presence. And I'm thinking through Jason's constantly talking about the gobs of makeup on her. And I'm not sure if I should be picturing a 1930s starlet, or if I'm picturing a teenager who it feels so uncomfortable with herself that she it puts this mask on as she faces the world. I mean, and they're all the relationships. I mean, clearly needing love and not wanting it from Dilsey, but vulnerable in her opinion of herself.
John?
The this is related to I think your question was about the relation between Quentin and Jason. That was one of your questions. And what do we think about the character of Quentin? And I think she's, I have a bias about what I'm about to say, but I think she's terrific. I think she's to be admired. I think she figures out from her conversations with her mother that Jason is stealing money, and she figures out for herself how she's going to deal with that, and she does it. And while I'm here, I want to say that I think both the parents, the Compson parents, they're beyond dysfunctional. They're dystopic. To me, they're the worst set of parents I think I've ever encountered in any novel. And it's just, it's really sad what happened to the entire family, all the children. They didn't, none of them had a good role model to look at in any respect. I mean, to some of the things that were done to the children, the changing of Benji's name, and this whole artifice of that the Boscoms are superior to the Compsons, and it's just like I said, to me, it's really tragic that any of the children had to grow up in this family, and the only one who, to me, is trying to get out of it was Caddy, and so that's.
And now Quentin.
And now Quentin, yes, absolutely. And poor Caddy, Jason's got her just under his thumb. He knows how to manipulate her because he understands that Caddy realizes he loves his daughter. Caddy realizes she really loves Quentin, and she wants to provide for her in the only way that she knows how, because otherwise it doesn't sound like Mrs. Compson would let her will ever let her come home.
Or her name be spoken out.
Yeah, even her name be spoken in the house, and she doesn't even want Quentin to be in the same room where she was raised. It's just bizarre to me.
Yeah, victims of the parent. The one thing about Quentin I find hard to take, especially hard to take, is her treatment of two things, of Dilsey and of Benji. And I see that as a sort of proceeding from the family situation as well. Jacob and Jenny and Harriet.
One interesting way to look at the daughter Quentin is that in this novel of brothers, all of whom seem to be afflicted by, they're all kind of victims of their situation. So the question is for Quentin, baby Quentin, is she going to be yet another victim of this family, or is she going to somehow escape, kind of like Caddy? And I say that because one interesting thing about her, especially in relation to Jason, again, we just kind of talked about that Jason is always one step behind, always doesn't have enough money, or nothing ever seems to work. But the remarkable thing about baby Quentin is that she is in control of a lot of things. If Jason hates the smell of gasoline, his car breaks down, his car doesn't work, where do we see Quentin? She's riding in the passenger seat. She knows how to operate, catch a ride. A lot of signs suggest she could make her Compson lineage. So that's kind of something I'm just going to pose to everyone else.
All right. So Jenny and then Harriet.
Yeah, one thing that kind of follows a little what Jacob's talking about, and this family, almost everyone in the family but Caddy and Quentin, her daughter, are acted upon versus being actors. They're this victimization. You know, Caddy, for however and at whatever age, she was trying, and just her life in terms of just the different things that happened with her, or that they show in the, or that he shows in the story about how she, you know, for instance, gets her drawers dirty. She gets right in there and fights. And Quentin, in a way, she's trying to break out too. Everybody else seems like they're just kind of caught up into this revolving misery. But those two are trying to move on. The others just feel like everything they're acted upon, they're not being actors, they're drifting, they're adrift, which I think he brings up at different points.
Let me, at some point, we also want to ask, do you think that, why do you think Quentin says, I have to have that money, I have to leave? Is she pregnant? Has she followed in her mother's pattern? She, like her mother, is defying the family. Like her mother, she is going to leave. But is she also following in this pattern? Now, Harriet.
I think we ask that without knowing. I think that, you know, while we're talking about Quentin's dilemma, we haven't really talked about Caddy's responsibility for it to a degree. That is, what Caddy does not do is come and take her daughter. And I think we understand from the encounters between Jason and Caddy is that she has absorbed the family's view of her as a fallen woman who is inappropriate to take her daughter. Someone in the chat asked if Caddy is a high-priced prostitute. I mean, I think we have to talk a little bit about Caddy, and what we're doing is we put these different sections together, because we do get overlapping but different interpretations of Caddy. If for Ben, Caddy is the smell of trees and concern. For Quentin, she is muddy pants and lost honor, and for Jason, she's once a bitch, always a bitch. But you know, and what we know of Caddy is that she's doing well financially, and I don't think we necessarily think that she's a prostitute. I think we think that she's getting money from where women in this era get money, that is through relationships with men, and that may be marriages. We have the portrait of her to come to still in the appendix, but at any rate, that's a question for us, how we're putting together Caddy across these sections, and do we just have three disparate views that couldn't possibly be put together, or are we in fact constructing a vision of her, and why does she leave Quentin there?
And at one point she says to Jason, I think, I'll give you $1,000 if you let me take her.
Yeah.
And then she says, oh, I couldn't do it. So why she can't do it, we don't know.
Well, he says to her, you're going to get it where you, you know, that he implies that she is a fallen woman who's, you know, taking money. Yeah.
And she doesn't clarify that for us, so that there is that question of her responsibility. She tries to send money, but is that enough? What else could she have done? How else might she have led her life? Or has she fallen into this pattern of being victimized by the family view of her? Rita, and then John.
Well, I'm wondering if, and maybe this has been discussed already, but of course, names play such a big role in this novel. And Caddy names Quentin for her deceased brother, who is the firstborn. Do you see that as sort of, we talked about how Caddy kind of had a better disposition and outlook and life purpose than her brothers did. And here she is taking and breaking a naming code and naming a girl after a male who was the firstborn, who died so in those days shamefully. So I just was wondering what everybody thought about the fact that she chose the name Quentin, and if this has been discussed before, I apologize for that.
It has,
Okay.
I don't think we have discussed it. Let's discuss it. John, you go where you want to, and then we'll come back to Rita's question if it's not this direction.
Well, I tell you, just her question to me, and this, if Quentin had known that Caddy was going to name a child after Quentin, maybe he wouldn't have committed suicide. You know, that's my first reaction to raising the question. And something I'd never, but it, you know, to me, it means that she loved Quentin. You know, that's the only way I'd interpret that. I'm backing up to what you asked why Quentin wanted the money, and to me, it would be, and I'm just, this is for me, this is just plain reading, and I don't know but it's because it's her money, and because it's money that Jason has taken and misused, and that's one reason why she wants what is left. And also because she is if she's gonna get out of this situation she's in and make something for herself, she's got to have some money to be able to do it.
All right, so there's that possibility that she just needs this money because she's ready to flee. And
Yes.
she's got to have the money to do it on. Or maybe she needs the money because she needs an abortion. That's another possibility. I was going to say also about naming Quentin. John's saying it's an act of love, but also it's a way of keeping Quentin alive, isn't it? If there is another person named Quentin, then here is Quentin alive. Tom and then Rita.
Well, it's
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
All right, you first.
Ironic that they've changed the name of Benji, who's of course not a very lucky name, the one for his terrible uncle, but they've changed that they didn't try to change Miss Quentin's name. It's sort of curious, and I think it's partly because they've just at this point not paying attention to taking care of anything, no family pride or anything like that. It's just let it all go. You know, that Mrs. Thompson is just going to be sick in her bed, and Dilsey's going to be running the house, and Jason's going to be complaining about everything, and poor Benji is left without ever having had any kind of medical care or attention to deal with the condition that he had, which has gotten increasingly bad in a way. Yeah. I mean, he had parts of words and so forth when he was younger, or he could cry, he could do something, but that's another terrible part of the tragedy, that they could do something about Benji.
Yeah.
I was going to say, too, I think that Caddy names her daughter Quentin out of love and honor and memory, loss for her brother. But Miss Quentin doesn't know that. She doesn't understand that necessarily. So for her, it's a curse. It's a failure. It's the suicide. And I think that she wants the money, yes, because she wants to get away. And maybe she'll need an abortion later on. I don't have the sense of that at this moment, but more than that, it's from her mother. It is her mother. That's her only connection of knowledge of love and care from that mother. So it's a big, that's why she needs it.
All right. So the cash is what her mother has given her. It's her legacy, and she wants that. Okay, Rita.
Well, also I'm thinking about in the naming of Quentin, could it have been an attempt for her, because she is so loving and big hearted, attempt to restore the family in a kind of a stilted, odd way? She's replaced the brother with the child. Like, it's like, I'm no good, but okay, here's this, and I'm naming her Quentin. And so I was wondering if that could have been one of the issues. And also I was going to say about doing nothing for Benji as a person. This is a time in medicine where you didn't do anything about people like that. In fact, the fact that he's not in an attic or a basement kept away from everyone is actually sort of a credit to that family. He's out circulating with everybody for all the world to see. And in an odd way, that's unusual. But anyway, I just was wondering what you thought about maybe Quentin as a replacement for the original Quentin.
I think that's some of what we were suggesting here, is that it is a way of not having to acquiesce in the loss of Quentin, but in guaranteeing a legacy, and a more hopeful one. As it turns out, it isn't, but or maybe it is. There you are. Lauren, I think we're out of time, are
We're
we?
out of time. I did see Helen had her hand up, so I just want to make sure we get to
All
Helen's
right.
comment, and then we can close.
Okay, let's go. Helen.
Yes, I thought that Miss Carolyn named her Quentin. And I've been trying to find it in my chapter here, but we need to check on that, because I thought she did that and she had certain reasoning behind it. So we might.
I thought it was Caddy, but
Well, that's what I'd assumed until I read that, and either I misunderstood what was written. But I want to go back and find it. Some of you may be able to get to it. It's towards the end of this section.
I thought I was really taken by Tom's point too, which I hadn't thought of making the comparison. If Benji's name has to be changed, why not Quentin's? Why would they continue with that? But all right. So I think we're ready to ask a lot of questions of Jay, who will come in here and clarify all.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye.